Doing a quick mic check. Fives, can you hear me okay?
Hear you perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ryan. Just doing a quick mic check just to make sure everything's working.
I can hear you.
Yeah, same here.
All the speakers are here. We're just going to give it about 3 more minutes for a few more people to come in. So we'll start right at the top of the hour. All right, let's kick things off. Thank you everybody for coming. Just want to note that this will be recorded. So if you hear something in here that you think you want to share with some of your colleagues, just let us know and we can get you a recording to do that with. So we're here to talk about some of the challenges that we face as security professionals in cryptocurrency, especially when you are joining a company and you're one of the only security professionals. I think that's the case with a lot of us. So I'm here. I'm been in cybersecurity for about 20 years now. The last 4 years, I've been in crypto, setting up security teams among several, at least 4 cryptocurrency projects. And I'm joined here by folks from zeroShadow, Seal, and Hypernative. Just talk about how you can set up a security program at your project. So some quick introductions around the table. We can start with, I'll just go in the order they show up on my screen here. Fives, if you want to introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, my name is Fives. I'm the initiative lead for Seal Intel at Seal. We take care of, within my initiative, we take care of ISAC, which is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center. As well, Seal has a whole host of different initiatives that can help with the community, like Seal 911, which deals in emergency fund reclamation. We have our safe harbor, protecting of white hat rescuers. We have war games and certifications, which are somewhat self-explanatory. Frameworks, which is basically a how-to guide for Web3 security, which is a new initiative that has come up. So that's us in a nutshell.
All right, Tal, do you want to introduce zeroShadow and your colleagues?
Howdy. Yeah, my name is Tal. I head of BD go-to-market at zeroShadow. zeroShadow, previously, we kind of started out as an incident response firm. I've done a ton of more like proactive security in the space. We continue to work on reactive incidents in the space. So, when funds get stolen or an exploit does take place, our team of global investigators comes in to try and triage and, do our best to recover stolen funds. I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Julia, one of our co-founders, and Ziggy. So I'll let them introduce themselves as well.
Thanks, Tal. I'm Julia. As Tal said, I'm a co-founder of zeroShadow and also leading up our investigations team, so mainly focused on the tracing and recovery of stolen funds.
Hey, my name's Ziggy. I work at zeroShadow as well. I describe myself as a human attack surface specialist here at zeroShadow. What that means is I focus on how people, rather than just code or infrastructure, can be targeted, manipulated or exploited themselves. So that's whether that's phishing, social engineering, insider threats, and even things like robbery and kidnapping. Attackers are always constantly looking for ways to bypass technical defenses, and going after people is a good way to do that. So it's my job to help stop that through education and remediation, which is a big part of what we do here at zeroShadow as well.
All right. And finally, last but not least, Hypernative.
Hi, I am Gal, CEO of Hypernative. Hypernative is a real-time security and fraud prevention company detecting real-time risks and then responding and preventing them.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So we'll jump right into it because I want to be mindful of time. So let's start with a introductory question. What makes DeFi security fundamentally different from traditional fintech security? And we'll start with Hypernative, please.
I think it's a great question. I think there are three things probably that makes it different. One is the definition of security. I think when we started Hypernative and we went to a protocol, for example, security was audit and maybe a bug bounty or formal verification. I think over the years, security has evolved because it's a much bigger thing than just code based. The other thing that I notice is that DeFi organizations or protocols or DAOs are a very unique kind of an organization, right? They have the perimeter of the security, who is in charge, who are the people that are part of it, what is the IT that is part of the development or the internal. It's very different than an organization that has a security and has employees and has computers that are and devices that are owned by the organization. And all of these processes, and when there is a very fluid perimeter, then there are additional risks. And the other aspect is that DeFi security includes all Web 2 or traditional security, from application security to peoples and devices, but it also has on-chain security, which is related to smart contract, how they are deployed on-chain and how they are interacted. And Solidity is a very low-level language that helps you make a lot of big mistakes. The time of an attack, of an on-chain attack, is really quick when you compare it to traditional security attacks that usually takes sometimes hours, sometimes even minutes, where an on-chain attack can really end in a transaction, and a lot of times it's transparent to everyone. So having the means to detect these and react to these automatically is very critical, especially in DeFi.
Okay. And for the zeroShadow folks, we have some builders in DeFi. They're starting their first projects. They're just getting their first bit of TVL. And you guys engage with a lot of these projects. So when do you think they should start thinking about security and start looking for, set up a security program?
I think the question is always today rather than tomorrow. There's never too late. But in my opinion, too late is sometimes when you're already live and handling real user funds. At that point, you're not just taking risks as an organization or a project, you're also gambling with your users' trust at that point. So I think from day one, as soon as you begin, you should be thinking about how security fits into everything that you're building going forward. And that doesn't necessarily mean hiring a big team right away, but what it does mean is designing your system with safety in mind. You should be using things like well-audited libraries and keeping things modular, and not reinventing the wheel unless you absolutely have to. And you should try and get someone involved quite early on, whether that be a developer with a security mindset or an external advisor, but someone who's security minded and who can flag risks early on in your project. Security really should grow with your project, and you shouldn't be chasing after it after the fact. It's way easier to build things, right from the very beginning than it is to patch them later under pressure.
All right, awesome. Thanks for that. Now, I'm going to start with Seal on this question, but I want to hear from everybody. What do you folks see as the biggest threats right now to DeFi protocols? Go ahead, Fives.
Well, at this point, from what I'm seeing, I would say the biggest threat right now is phishing and social engineering. This is where it all, for me, what I'm seeing, it really starts. And it's not necessarily the big transactions and the big thefts that are going to happen after this, but it's the multitude that are happening right now. And it's the age-old thing of tricking humans into making mistakes. And even some of your big stuff like Bybit and all those huge thefts start with that social engineering, that phishing, all of that, getting the humans to make mistakes that ultimately cost hundreds of thousands, millions, and more when it comes to DeFi. So to me, that's the biggest thing right now.
And Julia, you're dealing with a lot of incident response. Are you seeing that same trend? Like, what are you seeing as the instigator for a lot of these threats?
Yeah, definitely. I think the idea of everything coming back to social engineering is a really good one, because we are seeing that human element really being an issue. And one of the attacks that we see over and over is a private key theft because of malware being added into someone's systems, and that's because they interacted with someone that they thought was either going to be an investor or maybe give them a job opportunity, or even just provided them a website that they thought was going to do one thing but was really an info stealer, and then didn't even realize that they had compromised their entire system. So that human element is definitely something critical, and something that I don't think gets as much attention as it always could.
Awesome. And Gal, so you guys often see the hacks once they hit the chain. When you're tracing those things back, those exploits you see when the funds are being stolen, what sort of, like, where do you see it originating from? Is it like contract exploits, a lot of social engineering? What's your take?
Yeah, I think we see the same sentiment, like operational security and human factor are very big factors and big attack vectors today. We also see a lot of misuse of third parties from oracles and different kind of integration that lead to attacks, and of course vulnerabilities in the code. What I've seen is, right, like attackers are trying to find the weakest link at any time. So when people are focusing more on auditing, formal verification, then the human factor becomes easy. And the way that you would like to think about security is that the risk can come from different angles, and you want to really be able to essentially identify and monitoring all of these different kind of angles.
Okay, so now we have a brief understanding of the threat landscape, and we can go into some more detail a bit later. I find a lot of projects are struggling to hire in this space. They want to hire a security lead or someone to run security, but they're not sure what to look for in that person. So, and this is a question for any of the speakers here. What do you recommend founders look for when they're trying to hire their first security hire?
I'll take it first. I think it's a great and a challenging questions, right? Like it's the same for, I think, DeFi protocols and startups and alike. Head of security is something that is sometimes I feel people are a bit late to hire, and it's a very important function because you have all of these different things that you need to consider. You can't really consider them yourself. Even with one person that is joining, that person will need to essentially manage the budget that you're allocating to security and be able to identify the points that they want to really focus on. And a lot of it comes from, I think, understanding the risk landscape. So you want someone that has a background in security. I feel that you want someone that also has background in traditional security because of all the points that we touched, that a lot of the incidents that happens are also operational and malware related and things that are related to the Web 2 part of a protocol. But then you also want optimally someone that understands the different nuance of the risk vectors and where you want to focus. And to me, it's like bringing that full-time person is usually something that you want to do earlier and do when working with consultants and when the work flows and like amount of risk is at a point where you are now in a production environment, and leveraging a consultant is just not enough.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because I find a lot of folks are struggling with budget too. Like, how do you build out a security program? Where do you spend your money? What's the most effective way to spend that budget, especially when it's limited? So Tal, you've dealt a lot with like the sales part and engagement. Where do you expect to see security leads spend their first bit of budget? Like, what are the things they have to get first to get off the ground?
Is your question more so like, what do they have to do before they start thinking about like security budget spend, or is it more so like at what point, like what's the nexus as to when they like pull that trigger?
Yeah. So let's talk about like if you're just walking into a DeFi project, this new coin, and you're the head of security, and you're just starting fresh. Like, what's the first few things that you're gonna do? Where's the first places you're gonna allocate your budget to get the most bang for your buck?
Totally, yeah, it's a good question. I think oftentimes people start with like maybe like a smart contract audit, right? They look at like their exposure on chain. I think that's like a really good place to start. And I think most projects, tend to begin with that. I do think that as time goes on, they start to think about like more proactive approaches, especially like the more mature security leaders. And that's where they tend to engage with like platforms such as Hypernative, which is really great. But they also have to think a lot about like their infrastructure, right? Like I think something that people don't necessarily take into account from the jump is that there's a bunch of Web 2 architecture that's like super important when it comes to your security practice. And so I think like just being open to those types of conversations early is, going to prevent any major compromises in the future. And so I think like specifically in DeFi, I would say, probably right before mainnet is where I see a lot of conversations taking place. Like I feel like from my perspective, I'm having conversations with founders or like CTOs or head of security folks like probably 30 to 45 days before maybe like a TGE or before mainnet. That's kind of what I'm seeing at the moment.
Okay. Now I see a couple of people in the audience who do a lot of work with like Discord hacks and Telegram hacks. How do you guys see dealing with that sort of stuff? I'm a bit off script here, but this is something that's on my mind a lot. Like, you're in a brand new company, you're thinking, okay, I need on-chain monitoring, I need like EDR, I need, audits. But then you have employees who are, on X, on Telegram, on Discord, and these are all, places where we could potentially be hacked and lose control of some bit of our comms. Maybe Fives, do you have any thoughts about how can we tackle that challenge of all these platforms that we don't necessarily have control of?
It's It's a great and big question. Realistically, that becomes the human element again. We can put so much technology at defending people's machines when it comes to trying to protect them from them. Well, I hate to say it, but sometimes from themselves. You get too trusting of people online, and that leads again to that social engineering, which then leads to compromise, which then leads to loss of funds and other things. So, I mean, realistically, the biggest thing is education, and building. To me, when you build security in from the ground up, and you get people thinking about security, and you get people thinking that, you know what, I really can't trust anyone. And it may be a little bit of a paranoid way to look at things, but when it comes to all these people that you're engaging with, what's that level of trust that you have in those people? And it's getting people to think about that. Knowing that when you're talking to people on these platforms, if you don't know that person, at least you need to have people that know that person. You have to have that sort of a vouching. So before you're engaging with these people or getting them to help you with any of your projects, you need like 2 or 3 people to be able to vouch for that person, to know that that person's real. And even then, trusting that person is still something that's you really got to be very careful with, because it's so easy to be able to get into some of these groups and be that bad guy behind the lines and compromising people and doing all the bad things. It really is. It's a tough thing to completely secure. And I don't know that we'll ever get to the point where we'll be able to completely secure it. But I think education is the key thing here, and it's building it in. And like I say, if you build it in from the ground up and don't tack it on later, you get your people thinking about it from the ground up. Because ultimately what ends up happening, if it's something that's put on later and you're like, okay, don't do these things, right? It's that much harder because people are like, oh, it's so much easier if I do it this way instead of following all of these steps. So as you know, if you can get it from the ground up and get them thinking about it, then it just becomes part of their workflow. And when something's part of your workflow, there's not even a thought to what you have to do because you're already doing it.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on like social media accounts? Again, I'm talking like Discord, Telegram, X.
It's a little tangential, but just something that I wanted to bring up with this. Is that there's really like 2 other elements of the social media side that I think are important to think about in a protocol, which is, first of all, who you're hiring. So there's a lot of DPRK IT workers that will come around and reach out via Telegram or Discord and offer to work for your company and provide KYC documents that actually, I guess not KYC, but they'll provide like documents for themselves that actually can pass some low-level verification. So just the idea that Fives was saying about trying to verify who you're talking to and get 1 or 2 people's verification before you just like run with something is really important. And then the other thing that we've noticed in a lot of exploits is that there will be some kind of suspicious Discord user who asked about an attack vector, and that happens to be the same one that gets used. So not that you can predict the future, but just keeping an eye on when you have some random users coming in asking questions that might be out of the ordinary for a typical user.
So when it comes to hirings, this is one that worries me a lot, especially in crypto where it's not unusual to be hiring folks who are very privacy conscious. So you have, either they just don't want to be known very well or they want to be completely anonymous. Do you guys have any advice for when you're hiring? Like, how do you deal with that where you want to get the best talent, but sometimes the best talent just wants to be or have some amount of anonymity?
Well, I can add a bit of my 2 cents into this in that, and I understand that. Again, I'm Fives. Is that my given name? Absolutely not. So there, you have to have that ability within this space to have that. But at some point, somebody has to know who you are. And it comes down to, whenever I bring somebody in, whether it's directly in or as a volunteer or whatever, I have to see your face. I'm sorry. I have to see your face and I have to know you're a real person. And it may not everybody may agree with that, but that is to me one of the big steps that I go through when looking at bringing somebody in is, look, I don't need a copy of anything. I'm not going to store anything. I have to get on a meeting. I have to see who you are. And from then on, I don't care what you call yourself. I will call you whatever you want me to call you, and I will introduce you as that. But to have that knowledge right from the start that, hey, I'm talking to a real life person. It's not some, GIF or some, AI created, persona. I know that I'm talking to that person. So, and it doesn't have to be a whole bunch of people that know who that person is, and it doesn't have to be shared across everything and all of your, executives or whatever. But to have that knowledge of that person just makes that verification step that much better. I mean, you're never going to be 100%, but that's a huge part of it for what I believe anyway. And for the most part, I haven't had any trouble with that in any of the people that I've brought on.
It is
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, just to interject, I 100% agree with Fives there. You look at a lot of us who work in this industry, and many of us will use AI-generated profile pictures. We won't reveal our full names. We do so for good reason. We care about anonymity, and we care about our own privacy, and we don't want to make ourselves a target for these sort of threat actors. But someone does have to know us for us to be hired in the first place. Someone has to understand who we are and understand our reputation, if not our identity. Now, reputation used to be an easier thing to sort of use to validate someone, but we have seen a lot in recent history, DPRK profiles, fake IT workers that have got reputation. They've gone away and they've got good GitHubs that have become respected. They've already worked for a company and someone can vouch for them, but they're playing the long game. They want to get inside of the next company. They've built that reputation so they can get that next job, so they can infiltrate the next big company. So reputation counts for a lot, but don't necessarily always trust it. You should always try and have a face-to-face with someone, and even that is getting harder. We talk about deep fakes a lot in this industry as well now, and they are getting so much better day by day. So it's something you always have to be aware of, unfortunately.
But to add to that as well, that face-to-face coupled with several people who can vouch for that person, that again builds that amount of trust that you're actually talking to the right person. To me, putting all those pieces together gets you good people and lessens your risk of bringing in that bad actor.
Yeah, for sure. And just kind of antidote before I move on to some technical stuff with incident response. It is interesting, within our security community. So each speaker here I've met, except for Ziggy, and it turns out within the security and within crypto security, there's actually a lot of people who will be willing to do a face-to-face and meet you if they ask. They're not going to publish a lot on LinkedIn, or they're not going to divulge it willingly to everybody. But once you build that trust with a few people, it's actually a reasonable question to say, hey, let's meet up at a conference and actually talk face to face. It's not completely out of the blue. Like I say, all the speakers here I've met, except for Ziggy, and because I know Tal and Julia, well then, I can trust that, they hired Ziggy, so I can trust Ziggy. It's like this kind of, this circle of trust that you build with folks. Okay, let's move on to incident response though, because this is what keeps me up at night all the time, is trying to figure out how quickly me and my team have to be able to respond to an incident. So from the time we see something unusual on chain to the time we can actually get the people from a multi-sig together to take action. It can be very tricky. So I'm going to go to Gal for this. What is your expectation for how quickly a company has to be able to respond to an anomaly on chain?
I think it comes down to the previous question also that you asked, right? Like we want to have an on-chain is not different than any other, right? Like attack vector. You want to think about all the different attack vectors where on-chain is one of them. And then you want to be able to have a plan, right? When something goes wrong, how do I react to that? And how do I react really depends on your role access and how you think about risk. We are working today with protocols that have give Hypernative, for example, full permission to trigger an emergency action on chain based on Hypernative detection, and that could be even in the same block or one block after the hack transaction. So very quickly. We do have other organization, right, that want a more as you said, want the multi-sigs people there, and they want people to approve the decision. In the end, it's a balance between, right, it's a balance between how secure you want to be and how sure or how access is being handled with the protocol. For us, we always prefer the fastest methods, and I think from a technology point of view, we do see that in many hacks, a very fast response can really prevent, if not all, then a considerable amount of the funds that are lost. So very critical to respond as soon as possible, with other limitations, of course, that you want to enforce on yourself.
Okay, so one of the things I struggle with, and then anybody can follow up with answering this. So I get like an alert through Ops Genie at 2:00 in the morning that says something unusual is going on chain. It might take me 2-3 minutes to wake up. In a typical Web 2 scenario, I could take maybe up to an hour to respond to something just because and then analyze it, try to figure what's going on, and then respond. Just because there's no real funds, well, at least in Web 2, the likelihood of funds being gone within an hour are somewhat limited. Now that's different in crypto. So if you were to give like a number, anybody here, how quickly do you think I have to be on the phone with incident responders from the time I get the alert? For say if I have like an overnight team who's watching alerts.
So the threshold that we recommend is 15 minutes. And while it's obviously as soon as possible, because there's always the chance to try to stop the future losses like Gal was talking about. What we've noticed is that in addition to the ability to shut down a protocol, it's also super important to actually follow any funds that have been taken in an illicit manner as quickly as possible, because that can be the difference between freezing at a specific exchange versus the funds really spreading out and going to mixers and becoming just commingled with other things and just harder and harder to recover. And so that's something that at least we're always trying to do, is we have a global team, so there's always someone that's awake, and we're trying to keep to that 15-minute rule.
And following from that, what's kind of our expectation? I know there was a time, like even just 4 years ago in crypto, where the idea of freezing funds was just like no one wanted to do it. No one wanted to touch that. Like pausing a protocol was just a crazy idea. I feel like sentiment is changing a bit especially within the last year or so, where we're starting to see layer 2s who are more willing to freeze funds on chain through the protocol itself. We have exchanges who are being required to freeze funds. We've got Circle who can, basically at any time just like rug the USD out from under people if they wanted to. Not mean in a mean way, in a good way, because it means we can secure funds. What should our expectation be as security folks for protocols and apps to actually be willing to and able to help us stop funds from moving? No one wants to go on record with a thought there?
I can start it. I think Taylor Monahan has said this very well in the past, which is if you have the ability to do something, then really we are under the thought that you should do something. So if you are fully decentralized and you really do have you don't have control over like any of the elements of your protocol, then that is one part of it. But there are a lot more instances where there is more centralization than it might look on first glance. And so I think the ethos has really changed towards trying to actually try to stop an incident or stop illicit funds from moving if there is the option to do so. And I think another element as well is that a lot of times we are interacting with crypto via websites and not directly to the chain. So there is still some kind of element where you can at least make it harder to move funds, even if you're not able to explicitly stop them.
Okay. Now part of this is having, I suppose, like a plan in advance, right? So I'm very biased on this topic with instant response plans. I think everybody should have them. But I'm wondering if anybody can talk about the difference between when you're working with a company that has an instant response plan in place and one that hasn't set one up at all, which is just kind of like, doing it as you go. Like, what sort of differences do you guys see in the ability for the company to actually, get a good result out of a hack?
I can speak on that one a little bit. So without the plan, it's basically chaos. You're trying to find the right person, the person who has the answers on how to, shut things down or solve problems. You're trying to reach people who may be asleep. You don't necessarily know the phone number for them or how to get in touch with them, whether it be a Telegram handle or a Slack channel or anywhere else. And without that plan, it's very much chaos. And you're trying to solve problems on the fly, and that's never the best way to do things, especially when things like money are on the line. If you've got the plan in place, it makes everything much more straightforward, especially if you've war gamed it ahead of time. You've put it to the test, you've simulated a breach, an incident, and you've been able to test this all works perfectly. And if it didn't work perfectly, what do we need to improve going forward? If that plan's in place, you know who to contact, how to contact them, and who's doing which job, and how you resolve this as quickly and as easily as possible. And it should also include things like communication to, the user base, to the community, especially if it's something that could be a shared for or something that could be used to target elsewhere. Communication is also key as part of incident response plans. So it's all about reaching out and knowing who to talk to.
If I can add also, I think first we talked a bit about traditional finance, right? Like in a lot of other industries, incident response is a legal obligation that you have to do, and incident response is not just about an on-chain incident response. We mentioned before Telegram or Discord hacks, right? Like every area of security risk, you really need to come prepared with a plan. To me, that's the flow, right, of security. You understand the flows and the systems that your organization or your protocol is using, whether they are Web 3 or Web 2. You analyze the risks in these flows. Then you monitor, because some of the risks you take, you understand that they are not bulletproof. So you keep monitoring these different risks, the ones that you can solve with policies or processes you solve. And then you do have this incident response plan where, assuming the worst is happening, you know what you are going to do and how you're going to react and who are the people that you're going to call. So you will resolve swiftly and avoid unnecessary damage, because doing something that you know how to act in will be in any any area of your risk is going to be much better than thinking about it in real time.
Okay, now talking about instant response plans, one of the things I didn't often do in Web 2 security was worry about the physical attacks as much. Like I didn't have an instant response plan for if one of my executives were going to be kidnapped, because the likelihood of that happening in Web 2 was just rare. I don't it probably happens. I never hear about it. But Ziggy, let's talk about physical security specifically, because I think a lot of people are starting to worry about that. I worry about it now that I have very forward-facing executives and senior leaders who are out there at conferences. They're on podcasts. People just know who they are, and I worry about it a lot more than I used to. So talk us through, what does an instant response plan look like for physical security, and how do you prepare your executives for physical security?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll just talk some stats. So, we're halfway through 2025, we're in June. We've had 29 confirmed physical crypto incidents in that time across the world. There were 32 last year in the whole of the year. So, we're already on our way to doubling the amount of incidents. So it's definitely a growing issue. And, it's grown since the very beginning. Back in 2014 was the first recorded Bitcoin in person theft. And now we're at, double digits. We're looking like we're going to be close to 50, 60 incidents this year. So it's definitely a growing problem. It's one that every, project, every organization in Web3 needs to think about. I think the first thing is awareness. These things are real. They are becoming more and more common. And understanding that sort of overexposure that we might do to ourselves accidentally and sometimes on purpose, it is part of the issue. We perhaps share too much on social media. We have data that's involved in data leaks. We use, the blockchain itself is transparent, and that's why we love it so much. But it's also, a double-edged sword. Someone might be able to discover our net worth if we've not, obfuscated our cold wallet correctly or using services to do so. So a lot of that is around personal awareness around those sort of exposures that can make us a target. And then it's also planning for these things. So when people go on trips, are they doing a travel risk assessment? That's something that we do here at zeroShadow for many of our clients. Say someone's traveling to Paris next week, we will do a travel risk assessment. We will tell them there's been 11 incidents in France that have involved physical crypto attacks, and that's a true statistic. We will tell them where they occurred, places that they might want to avoid, and we will recommend services to help improve their physical security, whether that be actually things like bodyguards, which seems very extreme, but unfortunately it's part of the world that we're moving into. We're seeing a lot of, violent incidents. But it's also, understanding that if someone is taken, who do we contact to try and minimize the impact? Do we have, ransom insurance? That is a thing. Do we have contact information for law enforcement? Did we make people aware ahead of time? Did that person take, a GPS tracker? That is something we think about, and it's something we do tell our clients about. We do work very closely with, third-party security organisations. So it's all something that people have to be aware of now and have at the front of their mind, especially when they're travelling, but also at home as well. We recommend that people never share their location. We recommend people don't let people know where they live, because data leaks are everywhere, and it's so easy now to uncover information about people just by doing a simple Google search often. It's another thing we do here at zeroShadow. We do personal threat assessments where we look at all of the data that's out there about a VIP at a company, and we then try and mitigate that. We try and get it removed, and if not, we try and teach them how to avoid those things in future.
It's so well said, and I just wanted to add one more element, and I really want to echo everything Ziggy just spoke about. I think another key piece in all of this is, I don't think folks sometimes understand that they have exposure not by directly through their online presence, but perhaps through their families, right? If you're really great about your OPSEC, you never know if your daughter tags you in something, your sister posts about something, your mom posts about something, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, there's so many different platforms where things exist. And, we at zeroShadow also do, in our threat assessments, we uncover a lot of these vulnerabilities that you might not consider, and the way that you can get doxxed, and your location can be found, right? So a couple weeks ago we saw this attempted kidnapping of the daughter of, a crypto executive, really scary. And I think folks have to take into account that it's not just them online, that it's their entire, connection. So people want to take advantage of, there are obviously terrible people out there. There are people want to take advantage of your loved ones, and that's how they can get to you. So, it's just scary stuff and things you just have to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stuff that I never really thought about before. We could probably do a whole spaces on just physical security. I think it's a lot of stuff that we don't often talk about in the community, or maybe we do, but I mean, more recently we're talking about it a lot more. I guess one of the things that struck me right away, just out of curiosity, and then we'll move on to some other topics. But I thought about, should I hire for my executives, or should I look at hiring for executives some bodyguards? That seems like I've never thought, like, I know how much EDR costs. I know how much, on-chain monitoring costs. When you talk about physical security, what are the costs associated with? Like, how much would it cost me to have a bodyguard follow around an executive in France while they're at ETC?
It's certainly not a cheap thing to do. What we will always say is it has to be risk based. Now, if we are talking about France, because of the heightened issues that are going on in France at the moment, you'll have seen in the news lots of people have been arrested in relation to the most recent kidnappings and robberies. But unfortunately, the people who have been arrested are, the low-lying members of that organised crime group. They're not the leaders. They're not the orchestrators of these plans. Those people are still out there, and they will continue to do so because it's so lucrative to target crypto professionals. You've got to see this as you're investing in your people. You want to keep them safe. If someone gets their crypto stolen, that's a big loss. If you're paying for bodyguards, it's hopefully a lot less than that. But more importantly, if someone loses their life or gets severely injured as part of one of these incidents, can you deal with that, as a leader of a company because you wanted to save a few $1,000s because you didn't want to pay for a bodyguard? Now, in saying that, if someone's going to travel to somewhere else that we haven't got the intelligence to suggest there is these organised crime groups that are targeting crypto professionals, we will always be honest to say, you don't need to invest in such heavy security. Here's just a security review. Here are perhaps some areas to avoid and some things to be aware of. But security is not needed in this case. We're never trying to upsell people. We just want to keep them safe.
Actually, I just want to sit down and talk more about this, but we're coming close to time, so we're gonna do something later where we can have you on, Ziggy, and some folks from zeroShadow and talk a lot about physical security. But yeah, let's pause there. I want to get back to it at some point though, because there's so many fascinating things we can talk about there. But because we're getting close to the end of time, I just want to give everybody a chance to say, take a moment to talk about what are the practical things that security leaders in this space can do to help protect their companies. I'll just start with Fives. Again, he's the person on my list here. Fives, just a few practical advice for security leaders out there and what they should do to help protect their companies.
Big thing, and I mean, we talked about a lot already, but getting and building relationships in the security community is a huge thing. As much as you can, having, like, for example, again, I kind of toot my own horn a little bit, but with Seal ISAC and having that data that we have and that we offer, I mean, we're not the only people doing this. There are other ISACs, there are other databases of information, but when you make those connections and get access to that amount of data, it can only help you secure your on-chain, your companies, your Web 2, all of that much easier, because you've got that stream of data, whether it's, domains like in phishing, we're 500 a day we're seeing, different domains that are being used. Whether you're seeing the latest and greatest threats, things that are already happening, things that are about to happen. I mean, all of that data that you could be getting, it's invaluable. So making those connections and working as much as possible together in this space to defend. I think that's a huge thing right now.
All right, Tal?
To me, there are two things. One is educate yourself about the different solutions and companies operating in the space. Like at least get to know all the different solutions, and that relates also to what Five said, which can be right, like create relationship that will reference or tell you about the different solutions. The other thing that I notice is post-mortem thinking. Use the team or yourself to think, okay, I got hacked, my smart contract got hacked, my Discord got hacked. Now go backward and think about, okay, how did it happen? And then be able to surface in a document or in some way the different ways that you are exposed. And when you're doing this process backward, you're able to essentially flag the different areas that you might have not thought about, and then you will be able to look for solutions before it actually happens. So
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Julia?
Yeah, I think one thing that I wanted to bring up is just this mentality of trust but verify. I think that's become really important and something we've talked a lot about today. So whether that's people that you're interacting with, whether that's the actual transactions that you're signing, whether that's what kind of website you're logging into, I think across everything, it's just taking that second step to think before you act.
Awesome. Anything to add, Ziggy?
Yeah, for sure. So I think so often in Web3 we forget the origins of security in Web2. We actually have a document in zeroShadow that we share with clients, and I'll try and get this shared as well for everyone listening. We call it the 5 things to do right now document, and it goes through like very basic Web2 security tenets. But like the first one's like positive security culture. So we've talked a lot about community when people have answered this question, but it's such a big thing. We're all learning together, and while many organisations would traditionally see themselves as competitors, that's not really the case in Web3. We often see ourselves as one big community working against threat actors. We're all trying to build something. And the threat actors are the enemy. We're not enemies of each other. So there's a lot of community sharing. There's a lot of intelligence sharing in this community, and that's such a big thing. Building that positive security culture. And then it's simple Web2 basics like managing access, things like password managers, multi-factor authentication, things like using VPN and DNS filtering to block out those known phishing websites, those known impersonations. Things like enforcing the principle of least privilege within estates, things like Google Workspace. Not every single person needs to be a super admin, for instance. As simple as things like BYOD, bring your own device, is so prevalent in Web3, but we can still do things like mobile device management to try and guardrail against vulnerabilities that are introduced in that way. And last but not least, things like accreditation. So that's been such a big thing in Web2 traditionally, things like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, but it's also relevant in Web3. If you build these things in from a very early stage, you can harden down your environment, you can harden down your infrastructure, and make it much, much harder for those threat actors to find a foothold and get in. And then lastly, coming back to Web3, it's treasury management. So often we see organizations and projects which haven't got treasury nailed down straight away, and that's a weak point. They could lose funds quite easily just through a seed phrase loss. But they could be using things like MPC and multi-sigs and stuff to really lock that down and make themselves much more secure.
Awesome. That's all great stuff. Really appreciate you all coming and chatting with me here. It's a great space. And I encourage anybody who listens to this, if you are part of the security community, just get to know everybody else in the security community. It is such a welcoming space of people. Get involved with SEAL, talk to other heads of security. Everybody wants to talk about this stuff. And the one thing I wanted to point out that Ziggy mentioned is we don't compete in security. Within the security space, everybody wants to share. It's not as aggressive as some of the other industries we're in Web 2. Here in crypto, we're all inundated with work. We have so much to protect that we're all willing to really cooperate. So please reach out, talk to other folks in the security community, and just, get to know people, go to spaces, go to conferences. On the one hand, we want you to protect your personal identity. On the other hand, we really want you to go out there and get to know some of these folks. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and hopefully we do this again sometime. Cheers.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.